Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Oxnard Live. I'm your host, Daniel Chavez Jr. So hopefully you caught last night's show where we teamed up with Citizens for a Better Oxnard and had a very candid, open conversation with Oxnard City Manager, Alex Nguyen. It was a great conversation, and you can view that video on our YouTube channel as well as on the city's YouTube channel. So multiple options to be able to watch that, listen to the topics and the answers given, and for those burning issues on residents' minds. Tonight, I'm very excited to have our guest tonight, who I consider a friend, who I consider a mentor, joining me, and we're going to learn a little bit more about her. And it's one of those topics that people know her, but don't know really about her. And believe me, her history is a great history, and it's something awesome to learn about. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Sylvia Munoz-Schnapp to our show tonight. Sylvia, welcome, and thank you for taking the time to join me this evening.
It's my pleasure, Daniel. Thank you for inviting.
So, again, you actually have a history that ties into Oxnard, where a lot of people don't really know that. They just kind of know you as the council member from Hueneme, but you are actually a native to Oxnard. So tell us a little bit about, where did Sylvia grow up, and who is Sylvia, and how was it growing up then and what you see now in Oxnard?
Yeah, so I'm a native of Oxnard, was born and raised in the community, and I find, great pleasure in saying that I am an Oxnard native. My parents came from Mexico and settled in Oxnard, and that's where my family was raised. My ancestors, though, actually came to Oxnard at the turn of the 19th to the 20th century. So in the early days of Oxnard, probably at the time of formation, that was when my family was here. And they came because there were offers for jobs. And, of course, the largest employer at that time was the sugar beet factory. So many of my relatives came up during that time. My great grandparents were here. Great uncles and aunts were actually born here and or made the trek from Mexico. So my roots in Oxnard go back over 100 years.
Wow, your family pretty much was part of this before the city was even incorporated, because I believe we're only 100 and, I might be wrong, but I think we're about 115 years being incorporated. It was 1903. My math might be wrong, so I apologize to any of those math people out there. But that's amazing to have your family be able to date back before the formation of our city.
Absolutely. And so my grandmother, when her parents and her siblings were coming to Oxnard, she decided to stay in Mexico. So that's why my mom was actually born in Mexico and then made the trek up here to visit her grandparents. And it was at a really young age that my mom really fell in love with Oxnard and decided to permanently move here. And then, of course, then met my dad in the area. So I'm a kid that was raised in the private schools of Oxnard. I went to Santa Clara Elementary from kindergarten through 8th grade. And then my high school years were spent at Santa Clara High School. So I was very, very fortunate that my parents set aside that time and priority to send all of us through a Catholic private school. And I greatly appreciate all of that, of what they did for me.
We actually had the principal on with us a few months ago for their annual fiesta celebration that they put on. As we know, last year, COVID, it kind of canceled a lot of things, but they were able to do it this year, but it was all virtual. And we had him come on, and we had one of the directors of program advancement. She came on as well. And they just talked about how exciting Fiesta was, and how much fun it was, and that it was really, truly a community effort to bring everyone together and just outright just have fun. Were obviously you were around during that time. How was that experience for you? Because you actually, I'm assuming, got to experience it. I have not been able to experience it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So when the high school was putting that together, of course, we were part and parcel of what was going on. So we would see the booths go up during the week, et cetera. And it was just a great time for families to come together, for friends that maybe didn't have the opportunity to come to Santa Clara, but we knew them because of just our interaction with them in the community. I was a softball player in the local petticoat softball league. So we had friends from all the high schools. And so it was really important for us to gather. And the Fiesta was one of those places. You know, it was all hands on deck kind of opportunity for us. And so we engaged in whatever was for us to be a part of as students. But I think most importantly is that just to enjoy this fabulous time of getting together, raising some money, raising some awareness, and really supporting this great place that high school, we could choose where we go to high school sometimes, or maybe not, depending on where we live. But, certainly for the families that set apart their kids to go there, that we all benefited from that. And it was a great way to establish a legacy, but also then that continuing support that they need to keep the doors open.
That's awesome. So let's fast forward a little bit. Now you're an adult, you're working. I'm very curious as to what motivated you to leave Oxnard and go to Port Hueneme. Not like it's super far away from us, because Port Hueneme is literally the next door neighbor of Oxnard. And a lot of times people forget where the actual boundary lines, and as you know as well as I know, boundary lines for cities are just so complicated. You could be on one side of the street and across the street is another city. So what motivated you to go into Port Hueneme and establish roots there?
So it was because I was dating a guy who actually lived in Port Hueneme, and he ended up being my husband. And so that's why I moved to Port Hueneme.
Well, there you go.
There you go. It's as simple as that. And so then we decided to stay there. I decided to stay there and raise my kids there. And so for over 35 years, I lived in Port Hueneme. Although Oxnard, was just a step away for sure, is how you explain it. The streets roll from one city into another. And so, I had that area, that territory of expertise, maybe, and authority, and knowing where everything was very easy for me. And so I, my boundary lines didn't just stay within Port Hueneme. Some of the organizations that you serve on, like the EDCVC and VCOG, of course, they, expand into other areas of the community. So I was fortunate enough to be raised in Oxnard, then living in Port Hueneme. And I knew a little bit more about this Oxnard Plain area and the community that I served. I really looked at it from a larger perspective than just the city lines.
And I feel like that's a really great skill to have, an asset, because as a native of Oxnard going into Port Hueneme, you have those opportunities to build those relationships and work on common goals across city boundary lines. And I felt like that was a really great asset and skill to have. So what motivated you to run for city council, to get into the public's eye? I know when people ask me and I tell them, like, well, it was because of my daughter. We were expecting her, and I wanted better for her. And other people look at me like, why would you do that? You just are absolutely crazy for even wanting to get into the public's view. So what motivated you to say, you know what, I want to get involved right here in my city. This is where my family's at. What was the motivation?
Consider the role of being a public servant, one that is a politician, an elected official. It's a calling. It's not for everyone. And so, you yourself and others who are considering it, it's not to be in the limelight. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. There's quite a bit of heavy lifting. Sometimes there's issues that, that you might think, oh, it only affects that other city. And then you find it's coming to your city soon. So, with all of that, it's to say that it's been a calling. And I've always been in either corporate America or large nonprofits. And with everything I've done, it's been community outreach, collaboration, community building, government affairs, external affairs. And it was during my stint at AT&T that I had people actually encourage me to run for office. They said, Sylvia, you're from the business side of the world. You need to actually be in politics because we need people like you. And it came across at one time that, it came from my MBA advisor at Cal Lutheran. And then that same week, I had 3 and 4 other people from different walks of life all over the country tell me the same thing. And it resonated with me. I realized there's something that they're saying here that I really have to pay attention to. And so I prayed about it for the next several years. And it was finally until my dad said, you know what, Sylvia, you need to get involved in politics. I realized that then I had the green light to move forward. And so that's how it all happened. It was where I was encouraged, that I had people surrounding me that really saw then the value of my background and experience and forethought and vision, that they said, we need your type and come join us. And so that's what ended up happening.
Wow. Now, you served on the Port Hueneme City Council for 12 years. You've held the mayor title and the mayor pro tem title multiple times, and you actually ended your tenure on the city council as mayor pro tem. So now you would always be recognized as mayor pro tem Munoz now. What accomplishments do you feel most proud of during your time on that city council? Because as you mentioned, there's a lot of blood, well, not blood, but, sweat and tears that go into it. I hope there's no blood, but there's a lot of heavy lifting, as you mentioned, that it's not just always shaking hands, kissing babies, taking pictures, but there's a lot of moving gears and components with it. So what accomplishments during your time are you most proud of?
I think it's setting the city forward and making sure that there's some economic resources there. It's a city that's 4.4 square miles large, but most of the people live only in half of that part because both the Port of Hueneme as well as Naval Base Ventura County Port Hueneme are within actually the city limits. And so we effectively have all our residents, 23,000 or so, living within a small area footprint. There isn't much place to grow. We can't grow and establish more commercial and hardly any more residential. So we have to be smart about it. And so it was taking a cold, hard look at what we could do to have a good quality of life, but to improve on it. And so that was, setting some things in motion. I'm really proud of the fact that Port Hueneme is at City Hall. It was done one year where I felt it was really important to make that mark. The only other place that has it is I believe there's the grand jury that has an office in Ventura that actually has that displayed within their meeting room. And so I then had support. It was a 4-1 vote that evening. And that was back in my first tenure as being mayor of the city it was in 2011 that we had that vote. And it was really to support the national motto of "In God We Trust" that was supported by our House of Representatives. And so that's one legacy that I really feel proud to have left the city.
And we talked about it before, and how I admire that, to have that written and displayed in city government, because of the fact that when you look at many of our documents throughout our history, God is mentioned. And if you read the Bible, and I apologize to anybody, this is not me going on a biblical rant, but it's just stating the facts that if you go through the Bible, it talks about many of the endowing abilities that we have that came from God. It's our ability of free will, our ability to make our own decisions on things. But, it is important that we trust God, and that we give our mind, heart, and soul to God. So to see that in the Bible, to see our government documents in the early stages of this country mention God, it's important to reflect on that, because at the end of the day, we make decisions, but the ultimate decision comes from Him. So I commend you and the rest of the council members in that vote that took that stand, that was ultimately in line with what was happening on the national level, to be able to have that, because it is a very important thing. Now, it's whether you believe it or not, God is God. So I'll just leave it at that.
There was another thing too that I want to say that was a little bit of hard work and effort, and that was to coalesce our state electeds to make sure that we could shore up the Hueneme Beach shoreline. We've had one thing after another, whether it was a storm that wiped out some of our beach area, or, just the sand replenishment wasn't at the level that we needed in order to make sure that, the infrastructure wasn't damaged. And so there was one really difficult year that several years, but I was mayor during one of those years. And in effect, it was where politicians from both sides of the aisle then came together to really help us and provide a $2 million grant of unused grant money that was sitting available for us. And it was to make sure that we could get both a rock revetment. So that was really setting a permanent revetment at the beach so that nothing could get to our streets. And then having the sand replenishment be on the beach. So you actually had sand there too. And so that was a great accomplishment. No small feat, of course. And folks gathered around to really help us establish that. And so that was something else that I feel really proud to have done.
And that's amazing, because not a lot of people know about those challenges that, truly coastal communities like Hueneme, like Long Beach, Venice, that has those beachfronts, that there are those challenges with, you have to replenish the sand, the rocks, you got to protect the community at the same time. So, and because of the fact that Hueneme, where it's located, and I was one of those kids growing up, that was our vacation getaway during the summer, was going to Hueneme, enjoying the beach, playing in the water, the sand, whatever it may be, even using our bikes to ride the bike path that goes through Hueneme. So to see those things being maintained, and, as you mentioned, it's not an easy feat to try to get both sides to work together, let alone agree on something, to really try to help out this community. So kudos to you and the team for bringing that on. I want to mention, because people are probably watching and wondering, why she keeps saying my time as mayor and mayor pro tem. So Hueneme City Council, the way that they do it is that they rotate the seat of mayor and mayor pro tem, very similar to what Ventura has. Actually, there's actually quite a few cities in Ventura County, with the exception of Moore Park, Simi Valley, and Oxnard, that we actually elect our mayor. Do you know? I think that those are the only 3 cities that elect a mayor. Everyone else kind of rotates it, right?
Yes, they do. So the rotation happens in Port Hueneme, Ojai. It happens in Ventura, Camarillo, Thousand Oaks, and then the others have their elected mayors. So we, from the 5 city council members, actually then do vote on having a mayor and a mayor pro tem every year. It's kind of odd to have somebody who would have 2 years within a term to actually serve as mayor, and that's happened to me a couple of times. So in the 12 years of being on the city council, I was in leadership 6 of those years, 3 of the years as mayor and 3 or a little bit less than 3 as mayor pro tem. And that's an opportunity to not only engage in conversations and be the representative ceremonially, you know, as mayor at different events and represent the community, but it was a chance for leadership and really being acknowledged as that, but also trained up to make sure that you know how to run the meetings and make sure you know, set the agenda. And there's, you know, real leadership type of skills that are available and accessible to anybody who actually steps into that role. And it's a pretty exciting year too. You know, it's hard to give it up when your term then ends and you're reorganized again the next year. But I really enjoyed all the mayor terms and mayor pro tem terms that I served.
Yeah, I could imagine that it's always difficult to give up those titles, especially when you've been so actively engaged in those conversations. You know, one thing that I always think about is the first time that we actually met. It was back in 2016. It was when the telecommunications from the state ended up coming, had a public forum in the Oxnard City Chambers. And it was them talking about introducing a new area code because of the fact that the 805, there was just no more numbers. We needed a new number, area code. And I heard you advocate for not only Port Hueneme residents and businesses, but also Oxnard businesses and residents, that, you know, 805 is what we are. You know, this is what we are commonly referred to as. And, you know, I spoke and I kind of echoed the same comments and everything. And then after that, now look, we end up becoming really good friends. And, you know, I turn to you when I need help. And now we officially get to work together on the Ventura County Climate Emergency Council, which is a new advisory body of the county to be able to help implement changes or policies when it comes to climate change in regards to this county's climate action plan. So what motivated you to take on that role? And not only that, but you were actually selected as the chair, the first chair of this council as its new formation.
So it was something that came about from the general plan from the county of Ventura, and they set aside, you know, we really have to do something about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And so they put together the Climate Emergency Council. I'm just making it pretty simple so we can follow the dots. But Climate Emergency Council was a commission that they then moved forward and said, yes, we're gonna. I came on to this year, and we all then represent, so there's 2 groups of people, but we're all the commission. We either represent an area that is mirroring the supervisorial seat. So seats 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all have a representative, and that's how I sit on this Climate Emergency Council. Is I'm a representative of Supervisor Kelly Long because I live in her Area 3 district, and so there's a representative from each, and then there's a few other representatives. There's the special areas, as well as then we were able to appoint 2 new people, and that's where you've come on in the last month and a half. So you, Daniel, are an at-large member. That didn't have to be that you sit within a specific supervisorial area, but you came on to then help us broaden the reach and encompass the larger area of the county of Ventura. And so we'll sit in this position for, I believe there's 2 years. And with each of the years, then there's a chair and a vice chair selected from the group of 10 that we are. And so it's a pretty dynamic group because it's the first year that we've ever been together. And we are vetting out really some of the plans and strategies that were set in motion with the planning effort to make sure that we accomplish what the plan then says we should be focused in on. And you're right, we get together, we're getting together once a month, but we are in charge of putting things together that would be recommended to the Board of Supervisors.
Now, how has it been for you to be the chair? You're done with Hueneme. You did 12 years. This is a city that was already established before your time. To transition to the CEC, which is brand spanking new. It is even a learning process for county staff. It's a learning process for all of the members. How has it been for you to come into this group and it's like, okay, we're having to do this, we're having to set up these rules and, you know, try to manage everybody and get everybody on the same page, because not a lot of us on this council are coming from some type of public figure role. You know, I come from the Planning Commission in Oxnard. You came from the Hueneme Council. Someone else came from the airports as a director. Someone was a former Planning Commission for the county. And then you have others that never served on anybody. This is their first body. How has that been for you leading the council at this time?
I believe that my skill set really lends itself to sharing an organization like this. You know, being brand new, policy, and you have to implement them. But also too, it's just, you know, running the, you know, having the group be cohesive so that we're, you know, speaking from the same page in the songbook, perhaps, or that we have the background and knowledge of where are we starting? What was the game plan that was identified for us? And what are the things that we can actually affect? Because somebody could say, you know, well, you know, climate emergency, yes, we have a climate emergency right now, and let's do X, Y, and Z. Well, then you have to go back and say, what does the plan say? What were the elements that our Board of Supervisors actually voted to approve that says they want to see certain change? I also then, you know, was on City Council for 12 years, and every year we had a sand erosion problem. So we actually then saw some of those elements and realized it from a local community perspective. You know, some people might say, well, you know, it's because of that jetty that was built when the military took over the port of Hueneme during World War II, and the jetty then prevents the sand from actually moving southward, because that's what happens. Sand moves from our north beaches to the south beaches, and it just cycles. And so they're right, you know, the sand is eroded by something that was man-made, but it also is where we have valuable infrastructure down at the beach. And if it affects Port Hueneme, it's actually going to affect beaches down south, like Magoo, like Malibu, like it has, right? And so we have to protect the shoreline, and that's all been part and parcel of who I've been as a city council member, mayor, and mayor pro tem. So I come with some valuable skills and expertise. Also, I had worked at REI, and REI was about, you know, protecting and providing and maintaining those beautiful public lands and places that we all enjoy. And so by helping out in this community, I think it lends to my experience, my knowledge, my expertise, in order then to move the Climate Emergency Council forward. You know, we're tasked with something that's pretty major, and there are some things that maybe we would recommend that could be done in the next say 6 to 12 months short term. And then there are some that are going to take longer than that. And then there are some that could be possibly legacy programs, but we get to affect and we get to prescribe maybe some recommended action that could help us move the needle then on this for all our communities.
See, every time I speak with you, I learn more, and I'm again impressed about your knowledge and the information that you come with and your leadership skills, because it is very impressive. And again, I don't know how I would be able to handle leading the group that's so new, but I'm glad that you're in that role to be able to use your past experiences and your leadership skills and then implement them here on the council. And you kind of mentioned that there's 10, 11 of us. And when you think about it, that's 10, 11 different personalities, different backgrounds. I deal with it on the planning commission. There's 7 of us. So it's always trying to make sure that, you know, you're respectful and that you're hearing everyone and that everyone's voice is being heard. But of course, everyone has their own personalities that they bring to the table. So I commend you for taking on that role as chair.
You know, and I will, you know, be the first one to say, I don't know it all. I do not know, you know, what has happened in Ventura County in the past. All I know is what I see on the report, what I've experienced. And so I really value everybody's experience and background and knowledge. And so we'll get into a little bit more of that as we proceed forward in this council. But it is something that I think we all lend. We have that voice, and we all lend some of that expertise to move us all forward. So I'd love to, you know, continue having the group really solidify and move forward and really coalesce as a group that could share valuable information and recommendations that we can then implement. And we're looking at changes for the unincorporated areas, but also then too, it could play part and parcel of some of the departments that actually do then help municipalities and some of those incorporated communities. And so it's a big net that we're casting, and I'm really excited to be the chair of this new inaugural committee.
So I want to talk about now, what are your current projects that you're working on? I know that you are still an adjacent professor with Oxnard College. But there's also some exciting projects that you're working on right now, right there at Oxnard College. Can you touch on a little bit without giving out too much information about them?
Absolutely. So I'm an adjunct professor at Oxnard College, and I'm starting my 14th academic year this fall. So, you know, our program starts here mid-August. And I teach on the business side. So that's, you know, clearly the accounting classes, business law, business communications, those kinds of things. And I am the co-chair of our business and computer information group this year. So I'm really pleased as punch to be able to be one of the leaders for the organization for our faculty and all those that teach in that area. But one of the other things that I'm really involved with is to lead the financial literacy component at Oxnard College. And right now it's being delivered through the first year experience program. So first year experience is where we literally have students who have just graduated high school going to Oxnard College and realizing, hey, this is really different for me. For first year experience, it could be where it could be a make or break thing. And so we have this program called First Year Experience, where we bring the groups together as a cohort. So it could be some students who graduated from Pacifica, others from Santa Clara, others from Ventura High, others from Oxnard High, et cetera. And they come together and sign an agreement with us that says, in the first year at Oxnard College, they will, you know, complete 15 units every semester, that they would have priority registration, but they would also then have mentors for them. They would have tutors available. They would have counselors specifically for the first year experience. So we're helping guide and shape them through that first year. And so where I come along is we build valuable financial workshops that the cohorts then get to walk through. They get to earn digital badges too, which is the wave of the future right now. And so some of these financial workshops that we're offering are real basic things, such as what's a consumer loan, to how to finance higher education. So, once they leave Oxnard College and transition to a 4-year for their bachelor's, how do they actually finance all of that? What are some of those resources? And we start with other basic foundations, such as what's the difference between needs and wants in your budget? And then let's help you build your own budget. So these are some really valuable stepping stones that not only a student can really benefit from, but it could benefit them for a lifetime. And so that's what we have going at Oxnard College. This is our 3rd year of the program. And this year, for the first time, we're actually launching and providing these workshops past the first year experience students, but they'll be available to all the Oxnard College students, as well as then through community efforts like what you have here on Oxnard Live. And we're really super excited about expanding this information base for our community.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the community outreach, you and your team are actually going to be coming on in probably about next month, and share the information. And the also great thing is that it's not just going to be in English, but we're also going to share the information in Spanish. So on our Spanish program, they'll be able to have that information put out so that our residents that only speak Spanish will have that opportunity to learn about these programs and encourage their students to, their children to be able to participate in it. So I'm pretty sure I know the answer already, but I'm assuming that a PlayStation 5 is more of a want, not a need, right?
So I'm sorry, cut out there. So the difference between a need and a want?
Yeah, I'm saying that that I'm pretty sure I already know the answer, but that a PlayStation 5 is more of a want, not a need.
Correct. Yeah. So your needs are your basic things such as food and shelter and, those kinds of elements. A new iPhone could possibly be just a want, or a new, Nike sneaker, or going to the movies could possibly just be a want versus a need. Yeah. So we help build that difference in the value, as well as then making sure that that everyone is responsible for, for their choices and actions, and we could help them lead to either saving for something big, and or for even, financing the next steps here at the college. So we're really excited, and to bring it into a Spanish language component is really very, very important. Why? Because we help establish this communication, or encourage, or beef up the communication within a family, so that parents are talking to their kids, and vice versa, about the importance of knowing, financial literacy, and being, smart about then decisions that are coming forward for the family and for individuals.
Absolutely. And if I remember correctly, I think in previous conversations that we had, that there's also a program that kind of tells you how to manage a bank account, your finances, like a financial crash course, or finance 101. Can you touch a little bit about that and what it entails?
Yeah, so we even get into, what we help establish that worksheet, or, that personal budget. And then we move forward into some other things. So, what's going to be important then for setting aside in terms of retirement? That's investment. Some students may say, gosh, I really want to start playing in the stock market. You know why? Because it looks really exciting. But in the meantime, you're saying, well, is that a need or a want? And are there other avenues that you do that have maybe less risk that you could take a look at, such as then investing in your retirement, investing in a 401k if it's not offered through your employer, et cetera, those kinds of things. And so we give them a broader knowledge of what's out there in terms of, of financial choices that they can make, because everyone is different. It's not a cookie cutter approach. And so we have to really value that those differences come with then different choices then made for for individuals as well as families. So we're really excited to bring those elements together. We're even going to be talking about some special things like monetizing YouTube, and the other one is cryptocurrency, because everybody's interested in what's going on there. And so there are some special elements that we'll talk about, but most importantly, we're going to be talking about some of the basics too.
Awesome. So Sylvia, again, you have been part of the Hueneme City Council for 12 years. You sit as chair of the CEC, the Climate Emergency Council for the county. What are your plans, if any, for the future of getting back into politics? Or are you just taking it day by day and waiting for a sign to come about?
So I'd love to get back into politics. And so it's just going to be that, it's a little bit of your second part there, is that I'm just waiting for the opportunity that would be right for me. But certainly is serving my community. I do now live in Camarillo, so I moved out of Port Hueneme, but in essence, it would be for, a larger community that I could set my roots down. I'm also a new commission here in the city of Camarillo, so, I'm getting my start here as well.
Wow, that's awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, Sylvia Munoz-Snapp, a former Port Hueneme City Council member, Mayor Pro Tem, current chair of the Ventura County Climate Emergency Council, adjacent professor, commissioner of Camarillo. Man, there are so many titles. I think we are competing on the number of titles that we hold, but it is all for the betterment of our community. So I appreciate you being here this evening. Are there any final comments that you want to share as we wrap up our show this evening?
I just say that if you want to get involved in your community, just maybe even ask a friend or ask somebody that you trust as an advisor, because there's always a place to sit, whether it's on the board of a nonprofit or, a planning commission or some of the other committees that really do need some volunteer work. And it's just getting plugged in and getting started in those roles that would take you places. And so now please don't pass up the opportunity to be volunteers within nonprofits and local community organizations. That's where I got my start. And certainly it's encouraging to know that there's more people than you and I, Daniel, who are really interested in moving the needle and making sure that our community is forward-thinking, but also is representative and responsive to the community's needs. And so with that, it's just, get out there and volunteer. And I think that will work wonders, not only for your life, but for other lives that you're going to be touching throughout that process.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Sylvia. Ladies and gentlemen, Sylvia Munoz-Snapp, our guest tonight, and lots of great information. And don't worry, she's going to be coming back on again in a future episode, along with the team of Oxnard College, as they talk about the first experience program and other programs that they have going on. And they're going to come on and be on the English show with me, and then join Adam Lopez on our Spanish program, Oxnard Live in Espanol. Of course, you can always visit our website at oxnardlive.net, visit our social media pages at Oxnard Live, and see all of our postings of upcoming shows and past episodes that we have. So, ladies and gentlemen, please be sure to join us next week as we have the Director of Youth and Senior Services from the city of Oxnard join us, Renee. She's going to be talking about the senior service programs and how we actually have a very robust senior services here in the city of Oxnard. So you are not going to want to miss that. And the Colonia Senior Center was just reopened this year after being closed for 5 years. So that's going to be right here on Oxnard Live at 4 p.m. With our director from Youth and Senior Services from the city of Oxnard, Renee. And this is great information to be able to provide to our elderly community, our parents, our grandparents, so that they stay active here in the city of Oxnard. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm your host, Daniel Chavez Jr., and this was another episode of Oxnard Live, all live and 100% real.